well as that LinkedIn profile, and creating that all in alignment towards that next goal, bridging the gap between where you've been and where you want to go. So today, like Christy said, what we'll be discussing is how to create a high impact resume and how to align that to a LinkedIn. So I'll be covering both, and then I'll stick around for however long we need for me to answer any questions you may have. Before we really jump into discussing the resume, what we have to understand is that we are writing for an audience. So whether I was writing for somebody sitting in a booth somewhere dealing with a computer screen and they needed a set of permissions, I had to write towards that audience. So today, what I really want to convey to you is to really think about whether you are targeting the right roles, right? So if you're targeting the right roles, you will know how to create the resume that is going to be targeting that particular role. Before I even start looking at resumes, what I send my clients home with homework. And I say, okay, go find some job descriptions, play around in LinkedIn, play around in other executive areas, and think about what roles are going to be the ones that you're going to be targeting. Narrow it down to about 3 good solid roles and ask yourself 3 main overarching questions. One is, does this job excite you? Do you think that this is something that you want to get up in the morning and go do? Because if you're not pressed for time and you don't have to find your next role immediately, it's really good to find something that really suits you going forward and planning that strategy. Also, do you have a good deal of what they're requiring? Not only in their required, the first section of the job description will say required and then preferred requirements, right? So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have about 60% of those requirements, whether they be industry requirements, job description, education, all of those things. And do you have the proof points in the background to say, yep, I've done this, I've done that, right? If you haven't, then you can see that there's going to be a gap. And then the third thing is really looking at what those gaps may be that can prevent you from getting that callback. Because we know that if you don't align your resume towards those targets, the callbacks are not going to be, they're going to be fewer and far in between. So we want to take a look at a resume at a glance. And this is something that I created recently that I worked with a client of mine. And so we want to create the high level of impact. And there's certain ways to do that. So if you look at the resume, it's pretty similar to something that you would normally see. It has, you want to make sure that you include your name, your contact information, your summary. One of the things that I don't typically see that is really, really key is right here in the center is what we call an overall career achievement section, which really highlights and grabs that reader in to want to keep reading further down the resume. We also have, whether you choose or not, and we'll discuss later, competencies or the set of skills which are usually in that table of keywords. You also want to be able to go through your roles for the past 15 years. You don't want to go back 25 years, 20 years, because the person that you were back then, I can guarantee is not that leader that you are today. You also want to include your educations, certifications, and any thought leadership, like things that you've published, or any awards, all of those key things that really elevate your standing as a leader, be in that industry as just opposed to leader in that organization. One of the things that just some tips and some tricks to really make sure that your resume stands out a little bit more. We always see, and we're used to seeing the black and white, right? There's a black and white contrast, which is great. I really would enhance the use of color in your materials. So for instance, I like blue. Blue is actually the color of trustworthiness. So key in point, if you go to a job interview, wear something blue. This was taught to me in a study that we did at the university when I was teaching. So blue in a resume really makes the color pop, and it makes you really stand out. So some do's and don'ts: you want to include your name. You want to be able to include your a tagline. So for instance, if you have, if you think of yourself as the 3 overarching values that you bring a job, right, that you bring your organization, what are those things? In this instance, for him, it was operations, go to market, sales, business strategy, right? If you're a finance executive, you would be showcasing that you've got finance, maybe accounting, maybe treasury, things like that. Always really trying to depict who you are and the value that you bring. You also want to include the city, the state. Please don't include your home address, because your home address, people are going to look you up. They may Google your house. Believe it or not, it happens. So it's no longer the norm. Include your phone number, the best one to reach you. As same thing with your email account, but please don't include your work email account, because you may leave there, or it's just not professional. They may be checking at your work. And also you can include your LinkedIn URL address. Make sure you clean up the numbers at the end of that, and we can talk about that a little bit later. Also, if you want to use, and you use your Twitter account for, if you want to use it in a way that displays your personality or things that are okay for you to share, you can use your Twitter handle, or if you have a website as well, you can include that, but only if it enhances your position in this job strategy. So one of the things that we want to look at, and going back to this resume, right? If we were to do a critical test, does it pass the 8 and 30-second test? We know, and Google did a study that showcases that people look at resumes only for 6 to 8 seconds before determining whether they're actually going to keep scanning the resume. Now, if you haven't sold them by the second half of the second page, the third page is useless. That is the key in today's busy environment. So one of the things I always think about, scan it for 8 seconds, see if it pops to you enough to want to read it, and then read it briefly for 30 seconds, scan it, and then flip the page over or on your screen, minimize it, and then ask yourself these key questions. Do I know the value that this person brings the role to the company or the role? Is that value proposition clear? Meaning, do those things stand out that you would expect to stand out in a resume? Do you know what this person does? Do they seem to have the right experience? These are the key questions that recruiters continuously ask when they're searching for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resumes for one position. Does it sound like this person can do the job? Do they have proof points, whether they have done some of these things? And do they even have any metrics or anything that really showcase the results and the scope to make sure that it aligns with the scope of what they're looking for in their optimal candidate? So jumping into, and this is again the same person of the resume that I showed before, I just want to go into a little bit about the dynamics of a role and what you should have in a role. So you can see here, we've got this gentleman works at SAP. It's a publicly traded company, so we have their ticker symbol there. We know that SAP is a German software corporation with $24 billion, right? So you want to be able to describe that, because as much as we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves, we know that people want to pigeonhole us. They want to know the sandbox essentially that you play in. So we want to see the dates that you're there. You don't need to put any more the months that you're in there, the months and the years, unless you're a person that constantly switches jobs every year and a half or so. Other than that, you can just leave the year and the year into present or the year into year. You want to be able to highlight your role, and see how I did that in blue so that it stands out a little bit more, and in bold. Usually what I see is the company name in all caps, and then the role not in caps, in small. So I actually flip that to make sure as you are the global head of operations, you want to be able to have that be a standout in color, in bold, in all in caps. And then here in the role, there are key formulas, if you will. You want to be able to talk about yourself very briefly as, well, how did you come into this role? Was it something you were promoted into? Were you tapped to lead a turnaround? Were you tapped to scale or grow the organization? Were you tapped to create a new organization? How many people do you lead? Do you have a budget? P&L, do you manage P&L? What are all of those things that are your overall roles and responsibilities without saying roles and responsibilities? And then you want to be able to kind of go into a little bit walking the person through your role. What are you responsible for in that role? What do you manage certain functions? 2 or 3 functions. Let's say if you're finance, you also manage accounting, you manage HR maybe, things like that. And then we say, okay, we know that you are a good leader as part of this aspect right here, because you have delivered critical achievements for the organization. And these are going to come in the form of the bullets right down below, which really talk about what you did and what result did it generate. It's clear and simple. So one of the things that the tricks here is to really think about what to include and what not to include. With the reader, what you want to hook them in is to say that you led an initiative that resulted in something and throw out a number of either scope or result, so that when they're reading that, they can say, "Ooh, how did they do that? And how can they come do that for me?" If you say that you did something that generated something and you show them how you did it, then it could two things could actually happen that could hurt your being called in. One, they could say, "Oh, you know what? While that may have worked in their organization, that wouldn't work here." So then they wouldn't call you. Or two, they can say, "Oh, you know what? I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. Maybe I can get Johnny over here in this role, and maybe we can try that for 6 months and see what happens before bringing somebody else on board." So another thing that I usually do is I use what I call lead-ins, and I put them in blue with high impact words like turnaround, transformation, right? To make sure that I'm getting the reader hooked to want to read. If I see transformation and revenue gains, and then I see $25 million pipeline to $2 billion, that's really going to hook me. Whether or not I choose to read, at least I got that, right? Same thing here with the turnaround and the transformation. So if you're thinking of writing any sentences on any of your achievements, it's think of the construct of led ABC initiative that resulted in XYZ, and throw in some number to provide either the scope of the initiative or the result of the initiative. If you've got percentages, that's great. If you've got financial numbers, that's great. Usually make sure that those numbers, whatever number is going to make that achievement look better, is the number that you want to use. Sometimes it's percentages, sometimes it's percentages and dollar signs. It's all up to you. So those are the key aspects of the roles, and making sure that also that these align, once again, very critically, they align to the roles that you're trying to go after. So for instance, if you read a job description, you will see that the top 3 or 4 things that they're looking for are the things that are most valuable in that role. That is exactly what they're seeking. So you want to look at what they want in their ideal candidate, and then how do you become that? Through your resume, through your roles and your achievements, providing deep examples of how you've done that somewhere else. So then we can work on towards the education and certifications area, right? Where we think about what do we include and what do we not include. I see everything from courses, summa cum laudes, 3.79 GPA, all of those things that were 25 years ago. Nobody cares, okay? So I'll be the bearer of bad news. So include your degree, include the university. If you graduated with honors, summa cum laude, do include that, right? No GPA. You no longer need to also include the month of the year anymore, because we know that ageism is a real concept. We know it does happen, and actually it can work both ways. For my people who want to get on boards, now they want somebody to actually have more experience. So you don't want to include the month of the year. And for certifications as well, think about where you are right now, right? I have my techies, for instance, want to still write that even though they're CTOs now, that they could still, they know how to code in Java, they know how to code in C++, right? All of those things that make them back at that lower level. So what you do want to include are certifications that are functional and relating to what you've done and what you're going to be doing, right? So if you're a CPA, if you're a Scrum Master, if you've got security expertise and certifications, do include those things. At the bottom here, you can see some of the ones that I included as well. He's got a digital marketing one, which is key in his area, right? He's got an executive MBA. All of these are good things. Studies abroad in China as well. So those are things that you'd want to include. Then when we get down to the area of thought leadership, which is really important, as you are climbing up in your roles and you think about what does thought leadership really mean? And it doesn't mean that you have a blog, a personal blog that you publish. It doesn't necessarily mean that you publish some articles on LinkedIn. It means that you publish industry articles, that you publish in magazines that are in your industry across either finance, engineering, what have you, right? That you speak on panels that on your key topic. So if you're a security expert, right, and you speak on panels on security, you do industry presentations, you go to conferences, you write articles or books. Those are things that you really want to highlight. Awards, right? So being selected industry expert outside, in your field, outside of your organization. Those things you really do want to include in, like I did here, right? You want to be able to have those articles. If you can have them be linked, that would be ideal, so that somebody can really go there and see what you've written and really get to know you better. One of the things, as we go back up, I usually, when I work in my resumes, I don't work on the summary first. I jump immediately into that, into the professional experience area, because that's a tangible and that's a lot easier to do than starting off from a blank page and saying, oh my gosh, how am I going to write this summary about myself in the first 5 sentences? It's like, nobody wants to do that, right? So then I go back up and I look at those competencies or skills. And there's people always say, well, do I need to have them? Do I not have them? Are they keywords? Are they sentences and phrases? So my input into that is basically saying, if you are a director or you're a recent VP, then you might want to include those competencies as maybe a list of 12, no more than 15 keywords that really represent who you are today and who you are as that person, as that company's optimal candidate. Because it doesn't matter if you're that today without that person being the person that they're looking for. So we want to make sure that those are really targeted. However, if you're that perennial CEO, CFO, CTO, and you've been in, now your 3rd VP, SVP role, then you no longer need those competencies, because you're probably going to have a lot of metrics and a lot of results where that's going to be highlighted. So then when we go back up and even above that section, it are those overall career achievements, right? So what we want to think about is, as we've worked through the resume and you've worked through the last 15 years of experiences and you've created what are the best initiatives and the best results that you've generated across each of those roles, because it's not to say include everything you've done in that role. It's think about the top 3 to 6 bullets tops for the last 2 roles that you've had, to make sure that those are the best representative achievements that you've brought to the organization. And then as you do that through 3 or 4, maybe 5 roles, you will see that themes start to emerge as to what are the things that you've actually done. So if you're in sales, you obviously know that you've generated some revenue. If you're in operations, you probably have streamlined, right? And you probably have delivered some things like streamlined operations that reduce costs, that improve productivity, efficiency, all of those key things. So as those themes start to emerge, then you're ready to put together that high impact career achievement section, like I did up here, right? So depending on the area that you're going for and depending where you've been. So if you're an operations person, you're going to have some operational achievements, and you're going to want to coin them very differently, so that you seem like that that well-developed leader that you are in all of those different dimensions. So you're not just a generator of revenue, but that you've got operations, that you've got, transformation. Maybe you've led some turnarounds that you have up here, and you want to include the best of the best. If somebody says to you, what are the top 5 achievements that you've had over your entire career? These up here should be it. And what this does is later on, this informs your ability to go interview. Because if you have these at the ready and you have these really well developed concisely, you know that when they ask you this question, you'll be able to speak to these. And then you'll be able to really accentuate what you've done with some numbers very clearly. So then when we think about what, again, those are cost savings, revenue, turnarounds, transformations, using metrics. I cannot emphasize metrics enough. And I know that it can be a little tricky sometimes when we don't work in public companies and numbers are not disclosed. Sometimes you can do like a $ and an XM for if it's in the single millions, double digit millions, XXM, things like that. So let's really go back now that you've got the professional history, you've got your overall career achievements. At that point, you should be very well ready to write the summary. So if we look at a summary and we break it down, let's think about that first critical sentence, right? Who are you? And there's really 4 things that you really need to think about. It's who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and how. Here you can explain the how. So if you think of this construct here, if you're global, if you're international, or you've got international experience, do include that. Now, please don't write results driven. If you get anything from me today, do not write results driven. Like I always tell my clients, my 8-year-old, his results driven strategy is to come home from school and get that iPad first thing. Everybody has a result that they're going towards, overused. So you want to say if you're global, C-level executive, if you're COO, SVP, whatever, right? Finance executive, you could say marketing executive. If you're a director, you can say leader. If you're in, VP and above, you're an executive. Claim it. This person, C-level executive, who drives double-digit growth and profitability across public and high-growth SaaS, fintech, and high-tech companies through finance, accounting, M&A, and strategic operations. So you get the who, the what you do, the who you do it for, and the how. First sentence. Now they know who you are, what sandbox you play in, what industries, things like that. So once you have this, the second sentence then goes a little bit further into what type of finance. Maybe you can do accounting. You can do a little bit more granular look at from that 100,000 feet in the air view to that 50,000 feet in the air view, just a little bit more in another sentence. You don't want to have any more than 5 sentences or anything more than this because it becomes too much. Nobody wants to read too much text in one little block. So then you want to think about also as a leader, you are known for certain things. You're known for leading teams, high performing teams. Maybe you're known and respected for enthusiastically engaging and getting, through influence, getting buy-in from your teams, things like that. Those are very important to, as a leader, you're looked upon differently now than you are managing. One of the things that you want to also use, make sure that you use in the summary, don't use the word manage. So you can talk about oversight, you can talk about leading with high punchy words that are not so much demonstrating with you as I see a lot of hands-on as the phrase, and hands-on means you're the doer, not the leader. Keep that in mind as you go along when you're writing. So I'm going to take a brief second to have a little bit of water and then hold your questions, and I'll be more than happy to answer them at the end. So LinkedIn, and I think we could come back at some point and do maybe like 2 different sessions. There's so much to cover. So in LinkedIn, we know that at least 90% of recruiters use LinkedIn, specifically in Fortune 1000 companies, even more. They use LinkedIn to post positions, to vet candidates. Every time you submit a resume, guaranteed you will be looked up. They want to look at your picture. We're curious in nature. We want to see what you look like. We want to see how would you fit in. Is there anything in their LinkedIn that is not in their resume that's going to tell me who this candidate really is? So we also know that when you think about 3 million recruiters searching for candidates on LinkedIn, if you're not out there with a good LinkedIn profile, you're missing the mark. So we need to work on that. So some LinkedIn profile musts. A headshot. If we back up for a second and think about what is LinkedIn, and now let me remind you that I had the humbling experience of writing the LinkedIn profiles for LinkedIn executives, which was for me a very humbling experience, but we got through it really well. And so what they conveyed to me is LinkedIn is a network, like a networking platform. So if you think of yourself as going to a networking event, how would you show up, right? How would you show up in your dress, in what you say, in what you convey about yourself? And how do you do that with impact to go across a room of 200 people and make sure that you stand out? So LinkedIn is that virtually. When you think about that, so you want to make sure you have a professional headshot, not with your spouse, not with your children, not in a pretty place with the trees behind you. I mean, you can, but you want to think of yourself as that professional, right? First, it's first impact. So you want to also align that job search strategy and bring that into LinkedIn. So if you've got that resume done first and you know who you are, you know your overall career achievements, you've got those stories. So now you have to bring those stories into LinkedIn in a similar way, but also, well, I want to say, not giving away the cow, right? You don't want to give it all away there and make sure that that person, when that person sees it, they don't want to call you because they know everything about you that they need to know, right? So you want to make sure that you're also able to be found on LinkedIn. So you want to optimize the use of, critical words that are going to be for your role in your industry. Keywords, highly impacting for, highly important for those algorithms. You want to also make sure that you're describing, you're taking people through your roles and walking them through so that they see what you've done, whether how many people you've led, if you can talk about the budgets that you've led, if you can talk about the top 2 achievements, the top 2 initiatives that you led and how that, impacted the organization. You want to be able to include those things. Also, don't forget, to go through your education, again, your certifications, awards, volunteerism. That really kind of paints a picture of you doing something good for the community. Any organizations that you belong to, both professionally and if you have, for instance, if you're part of an organization because it's a good cause, also include that. Your skills section, those are those 50 skills that you get to add in. Make sure you really do those, include all of those, so that people can come in and endorse you for them. And as people do, then, for instance, if you've got key operations skills, then you're going to see that 50 people have said, yes, this person has, they definitely are known for their operation skills. And then also we'll talk later about the endorsements and why that is so important. So if we think and look back up at that headline, we know that LinkedIn gives you 120 characters in that headline, which is right here, right? So what you want to do is you want to use them as much as you can. Typically what people do and what I see is, VP of XYZ at XYZ company. Why you don't want to do that is because right here, you're already having the company that you work for is right here in the top. Your education is right here as well. So what you really want to do is this is where the algorithms really come in. So you want to make sure that those are the keywords that you would be found for. So if somebody is looking for somebody with digital transformation, you want to have that digital transformation in there. If you are a CFO, you need to say that you're a CFO. If you're a finance executive, if you're a technology executive, if you're in engineering, what are your key skills and things that you do, right? Those need to be in there in 120 characters or less. So that's very strategic. And then, so I just did mine only for a second of a screenshot so that you could see when you look at somebody, this is exactly what you would see when you go in. So you want to look at where the impact is. You want to create the impact right here. And then also down here in the about, what is the first thing that it's going to see before you get to that see more button, right? Before you used to be able to scroll. So we want to make sure that you look highly impacting. So again, like the resume, people want to scroll down and see what you've done. So then in the about section, what you want to make sure so you know that there's 2,000 characters that you're given with LinkedIn, and that's with spaces, so you want to max it out. You want to make sure that, again, that about section, which is very similar to your summary in your LinkedIn, in your resume, you want to make sure that really aligns to your job search strategy. You are, again, speaking to an audience, and who is that audience, and how are you presenting yourself for those types of opportunities, right? So you want to also think about, you're in a room, you're introducing yourself, you want to do this in first person. That is a huge question. People ask me all the time, well, most people do it in third person. All of my colleagues, even my the leaders in my organization still use third person. No, you're introducing yourself. You're saying who you are, what you do, who you do it for. Maybe this time you can talk about how, maybe you're passionate about certain things. Here is a proper place to be able to do those things. So then you want to think about also including some measurable metrics as much as you can. I know that it's LinkedIn and people feel really uncomfortable. They feel that, well, maybe I'll be called to task. Maybe I shouldn't include those metrics. The company may not be happy with me. Think about it. This is your moment. This is a place to shine virtually. So if you can share it and you're not, the company is not privately held or where you're going to get in trouble for those things, go ahead and include some things. Even if it's a percentage of growth, you can always include that. Thinking about also describing your background. How does your background help? How you have solved problems, how you have driven turnarounds, how you deliver transformation through particular skills that you have, working with people, leading people together to discover new things, innovate, launch new products to market, all of those amazing things that all of my high achievers do. So then again, very, very quickly going through the roles, right? Grabbing the reader and taking them through your role. Again, first person, no bullets in the roles as well. And you get 2,000 characters for that as well, right? You want to write a story and you want to lead them through, letting them know what your roles and responsibilities were without saying that. Kind of do a storytelling in a way. Don't make it so boring to read, like did this, did this, did this. That's the resume. This is a place where you can do that a little bit more in a storytelling narrative. And then also make sure that you use some really good language. You transformed, you turned around, you led. Don't talk so much about you as a manager. You had oversight, you spearheaded, you achieved, you accomplished, you drove, things like that are very important to really getting your that actually exudes your passion. So instead of saying you're passionate, here you can use keywords to actually show them that you're passionate about something, just through those words. As you finish your roles and then you go down a little bit further, you can also include some posts within your role. So if you did presentations or if you did a panel and there's a picture of you being on a panel or giving a presentation, you can include that within your roles. That's really important. People love to see pictures. So you want to include that. Any articles, you might want to write some articles on LinkedIn before you actually get them published. But if you have published, go into the accomplishments section, which is really important, and really talk about publications, any patents. I was working with a gentleman the other day who had 31 patents and they were not on his resume and they were not on his LinkedIn. Key point, he's like, I don't believe in tooting my own horn. I didn't think it was important. Oh my goodness. Any awards, honors, languages are also important. A lot of us are multicultural and multilingual. So you want to include that in there. Again, organizations make you really kind of creates that personality of who you are. Your skills, max them out. So then after your LinkedIn, you're really happy with it. You think it's really good. It tells you at one point that you're a rock star at the top, which means you've completed all of those sections really well. Go into that job seeking preference and you'll be able to click that. So if you click your name, you click on privacy and security, and then it'll bring you to this. Click on job seeking preferences, because this is really key to making sure that it's completely set up well for recruiters to find you. So you want to be able to, job application settings basically will allow you to include your contact information and upload your resume. But the resume only for you to submit to opportunities, so that you can click the same one every time when you want to hit the, apply for this opportunity button. When you click that, you can select the resume that you've got saved there. One of the key things I'm going to say is do not post a picture of your resume on LinkedIn, because again, that's a totally different ball game. And again, I think more there, you're giving away the cow. You want them to call you for your resume as opposed to you giving it away for free. So then obviously let recruiters know you're open to opportunities. It's a simple yes or no. So here you want to say yes, even though in some companies, for instance, HR departments can go in and say, hey, the VP of sales, Johnny, he may be looking for a job. So they'll look him up and they'll see whether he's actually looking for a new opportunity or not. That they a lot of LinkedIn, for as much as they want to be keeping your information private and confidential, they can't do it at 100%. But if you're still looking for a role, I definitely would suggest that you still click yes on that one. They have the signal your interest to recruiters at companies who've created alerts, one of the things you want to do is really go through some companies that you're interested in and create alerts. So if you're interested in working for Coca-Cola or Home Depot or things like that, or companies that have really piqued your interest, anytime if you've created an alert, they'll send you some push notifications to let you know that there's job openings in those companies. Also, the silly one is commute preferences, but if you live in a big city like Atlanta or San Francisco, you want to say that you don't want to commute more than 50 miles from your house, then there you go. That's where you would put those parameters. But I think for me, that would be a little bit too limiting. Then when we think about too, sharing your profile, a lot of people, when you go into LinkedIn and you don't see their picture, but you know that there probably is one there, or you don't see an about section, it's because they haven't made it public. So here, once you have your LinkedIn, make sure that you are found, that you can share who you are, that they can see your face. You know, give a pretty simple smile. Don't show all your teeth. You know, don't seem like I always tell. I actually had to tell a client of mine who I loved working with for 6 weeks, and I could see his smile over the phone. And then his picture, I had to say, you know, as much as I love working with you, I really want to see the guy that I know. And your picture, you look like a terrorist. And I can say that because my father's Lebanese and he used to scare all of my dates. And you look just like that person. So I'm like, I just want to make sure that you shine, give a little smile, show some lightness. And then also there's the stored job applicant accounts where you can, it really stores for 6 months your all of the places that you have applied for, so that you can always go back and see if you want to recheck with those companies again as well. So then when we think about recommendations, and I'll wrap this up, I want to make sure that you get recommendations from 3 different types of people, which is very critical. People think that people don't look at them. They do. I always look at, I'm very interested to see what people have to say about the people that I'm working with. So from your perspective, you want to get 3 different types. People, leaders who you've reported to, that basically say they give you an initiative, they charged you to do something, and you delivered, you over-delivered, you achieved expectations, right? So you want to be able to be that person that works well for an organization. Then you also want peers who've collaborated alongside you, so that they can say, essentially, you play well in the sandbox, you don't throw sand, right? Somebody that says, John and I collaborated on ABC initiative and we were able to achieve our goals through XYZ, right? And then also, because you're a leader now, you want to talk about, you want people to know that you're a good leader by showcasing some people who have said, I loved working for John. I worked with John for 3 years and he mentored me, allowing me to grow in my profession. I was able to get promotions. I would happily work with John again. You know, more specifically, the things that you've mentored on or led people on. But if you have those 3 types, you're pretty golden as far as an organizational view. So thank you. And at this point, I'd like to open it up to any questions that.
Okay. Adriana, I have been recording all the questions. So I'll go ahead and go through that. And then if we have any time left to open it up to the group. But so one of the questions is, how do I align my LinkedIn profile with various versions of my resume?
So again, when we think about, people do have various versions of their resume. I can tell you that I work with people who sometimes pay me extra to have different, like 2 or 3 versions. So if we think about overall, you have a definite set of skills. So let's say you are a technologist, but now you're a business leader and you want to be known for both, right? You want to be able to give examples of who you are. So if you're a technology leader, you can say, and you're aligning it, you could say business-centric technology leader. You can include all of those. If you think about, again, it's not just where you are and what you've done, it's aligning to where you want to be. So which is important. So if you think about the opportunities that you are going for, making sure what's in your LinkedIn profile are the examples. They can be from anywhere of any of the 3 resumes that you may currently have, as long as those stories are tailored to substantiate that you would be a good candidate for those types of roles that you're going for.
Okay. And then how to address or include speaking at conferences?
So in the, you can do that again, like in the pictures. You can, if you have a picture of it, you can include it under the role where it took place. Also, those would be called projects. So if you go onto the right-hand side and you include like
But that's
skills.
that's in LinkedIn. What about on the resume?
Oh, on the resume. So that then under thought leadership. So if you've done it, if you're a speaker at a conference, do speaker, colon, and then you give the title of the presentation that you gave and who you gave it for and the year, and make sure that also those are like the top most current ones and also the ones that are tailored towards that future opportunity as well.
Okay. And then what about an example of a value proposition tagline?
So, okay, so when you think about, and you saw that one there, you could say, you know, and I get the pleasure of working for some people who deliver $1 billion impact, and they have a really hard time saying so. And so, you know, it's like delivering $1 billion impact through, you know, M&As, IPOs, and financial leadership. You can keep it really simple.
Okay, here's another question. What if I want to switch careers and do what I did more than 15 years ago? Isn't that past experience relevant?
It is relevant if you are looking to go somewhere where you've been, which happens a lot. What you want to do is you can showcase that. So a lot of my people who, for instance, grew up at Microsoft and now they want that C-level role. So but they want to go back and showcase some of that experience. We bring it in that overall career achievement section. So if you did something fantastic for IBM, right, and you haven't had a role at a company that's like IBM in the past 15 years, you can bring that experience up in your overall career achievement section to say what you did then. You can say at IBM, I did XYZ, right? So that you're bringing that up. But when you think about your roles, talk about, bring in as many stories as you can in your current roles that seem similar to what you did back then from that perspective.
And what about tailoring a resume to a specific job?
Okay, so in that, I personally don't want people to hire me for that directly, only because I always think that it may be a waste of your money to do it that way. But absolutely, every single job that you submit for, you're going to have to change something in your CV. So you have your regular resume, the one that you're going to use most often, and then you're going to tailor it you're going to save for multiple versions. So if you're going for let's say a more data analytics company or role, you're going to change what you've done a little bit towards that role. You're going to change the first line of that summary. You may change the overall summary, right? And then you may reorganize those bullets of achievements to fit more on top. The ones on top are the ones that are going to go more towards that role. But you are going to have to do some tailoring here and there.
All right. And is a summary or headline essential?
Yes.
Okay.
The tagline is not, but I think it's something that really crystallizes what you bring to the table. But the summary absolutely is.
Okay. And then what if I'm changing careers entirely? How do I leverage transferable skills?
Again, it goes back to based on what you did. And this happens a lot with my people who want to change careers and don't know exactly how to position. You must have done something in the past that led you to where you are today. What did you do in the past? What are those skills or what are those things that you did that are similar to what you're going to be asked to do next?
Okay. And regarding the color blue in resumes, is blue good for electronic submissions?
Electronic, so it depends. So yes, it is good in the sense that you're probably going to be submitting your PDF. You may also be asked to submit a text-only document. So it is good. You're going to be sending a PDF. It's going to look punchy. In some instances, you're going to be asked to go in and submit it in a form, right? So at that point, the blue is not going to show up. But if you do send it as an attachment or if you upload it into LinkedIn, that is how they will see it.
Okay. And then what about the use of cover letters?
Cover letters are very effective, and these are your one place to shine. Including in LinkedIn, you can always update them when you send them in, and you want to be able to say your credentials, are such that allow you to do this job. And there you want to say you're looking for a person that knows how to do this and this and this. I am that person because I have, and you can create that over, the overall career achievement section. You can take the top 3 bullets of that and include it in there, so long as those are the ones are of types of, examples that would go along with what they're looking for in their candidate.
Okay, and you may have answered this already, but do you want to include key terms from the job description into your resume?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. If you think about it, that is actually one of the subliminal things that I do when I ask people to, first I ask them for their 3 job descriptions. You can search for 20. Send me the 3 overarching ones that really you want to use, the types of roles that you want. And I actually go through them and I start highlighting the words that I see that pop out of those 3. And then I try to infuse those within the writing, because I know that if they remember the person who wrote that job description, when they look at that resume, it's going to subliminally start to pop. You're going to seem like that candidate even more so.
Okay. And there's a couple of people who have asked this question. I've been unemployed for a long time and greater than a year, but I volunteered at various companies. How do I include that so it doesn't look like I've been just doing nothing?
Right. So when you think about what your volunteering is, if it's been even for free, you can say you're an advisor. You can say that in terms of the role, ask them what they're allowing you to use, if they're allowing you to use an advisor, so that they could, potentially serve for you as a reference. But then, yeah, absolutely explain what you've done for them.
Okay, and what about what if a company wants you to put the years of your degrees before you apply?
That would be a red flag. I would do so, but that would be a red flag for me.
I kind of think it
I mean,
might be
I would
illegal.
think, it's kind of funny for my board women, for instance, who are really young and in their late 30s. It's like, you've got a whole host of time, there. It's like, so in a resume, what you don't want to do is you don't want to say that you're this person with 15 years of experience, because you never know if 15 years is not enough or too much, right, in a resume. So you don't want to do that.
Oh, that's a good point.
So in a board, it's the flip side. You could be too young.
Okay. And then what about including awards like Toastmasters awards?
You can, because that if you're particularly going to be somebody who's going to be out giving presentations and and representing the company, that's actually a good one to have, only because it actually says that you know how to get up and speak.
Okay. I would agree with that, by the way. There's a couple of people who have asked, I have a very unconventional background. How do I, yeah, right, you do. How do I portray that in a resume? And how can I get a recruiter to really think about my resume as being somebody that they should take a look at?
So from that point on, I would probably do it more as a functional resume, right?
Okay, and that was another question. How do you do it?
Yeah, so there is a difference. I have an English degree and I have a research, library degree. If I want to go back to my academic library years, then I would have a totally different resume than my writing. So what I would do is I would still have that summary that goes along with the type of role that I would want. I would have my overall career achievements towards that role, but also including looking at the totality of my experience. And then the bottom would have the professional experience area would be broken out functionally, with the one mostly giving examples in the way that you're going to in the direction that you're going to go.
Okay. And then what about including the past experience that is really impressive? And we have a lot of people. So say you worked for GE for 10 years, but that was 15 years ago. How would you include that past experience without including the number of years or the years that you were there?
Right. So, and again, that's where that overall career achievement section is important. I worked with people, like I said, who grew up 15, 20 years in Microsoft, and then they wanted that C-suite title. And I can say this directly, who went and did a startup to get the CMO role that she'd always wanted. But then the CMO role was at a startup, and that wasn't, the $9 million was peanuts compared to the $340 she made the company in 6 months by launching the Xbox. So I still brought up that launched the Xbox, generating $340 million in that overall career achievement section, because that's
Okay.
still important. That's still her claim to fame.
Okay, and what about if you're over 60 and do you really want to put your picture on LinkedIn, or what about a picture of your business card?
I would still put a picture of yourself. If you don't at this point, it's going to seem as though you've got something to hide. So again, a professional headshot, and make sure that you look your best. I see that all the time.
Okay, and what about an example with lawyers? How do you describe your accomplishments if you don't have quantifiable results?
So some places and some roles, you're not going to have as many quantifiables, and that's, I work with lawyers all the time. So there, what you want to highlight is you want to highlight the industries. So maybe you're an attorney in a certain area, and who have your clients been? Maybe you can't describe obviously who your clients are by name, but you can say that you represented, manufacturing industry, a $8 billion manufacturing industry client. So at that point, what you're doing is you're providing the scope. So it's not so much as, you can always describe scope, right? In terms of the industry, even if maybe you can't talk about who your client is, but you're tapping into a $1 trillion market, something like that, you can always describe what that scope is, even if you don't have results.
Okay,
As
so
long as the sentence at the end says what it was that you were going to do. So you did something.
What it resulted in, or yeah. Okay.
Or what it could have resulted in, yeah.
Okay, and then what about including learning courses on your LinkedIn profile?
Yes, you can include those so long as it so long as it enhances the fact that you're a leader in that industry and in that aspect. So don't include a course that would be beneath your role.
Okay, and what about including reference letters with a resume?
No. Mm-mm. I would wait until you're called, because when you submit your resume, what you want to make sure is that you say that you've done all of this and that you've generated all of these results. The hows and everything else, you want them to come to you for. Because if you do include, the more you include, they could say, well, now that you've given me all that you are, why do I need to really call you? I know who you are. Maybe you'll land on top of that pile, maybe you won't, but you want them to call you back to see how can John come do that for us?
Okay, and then you use the word keyword several times, as well as mentioning an algorithm. Can you explain that?
Yes, so when you are both for your resume and your LinkedIn, you want to make sure that you have keywords that are in your industry. And so for instance, if you're a SaaS expert, you've got software. So you want to be able to have SaaS and software in your materials. If you're a CFO, don't just leave it to CFOs, include words in the finance world, right? Finance executive, treasury, accounting, all of those keywords that would be found in your industry. So if you're in marketing, you want to have digital transformation. If you're in sales, you want to be able to talk about profits. You want to be able to talk about revenue. So all of those, the keywords, if you think of what are the top 20 words that would be used in my role. Okay. You want to be able to infuse them all throughout.
And what about a one-page resume?
You can have a one-page resume as long as you've got your overall career achievements and you know that your history based on where you have had your roles and the companies and the role titles are going to be well demonstrated and are going to be looked upon really well and impressed. So if you've got really good roles in really good companies, renowned companies in your area that are similar to the ones that you're going to go for, and if that's going to be attracting to them, then yes. But I would still probably go for 2 pages.
Okay. And then how would you recommend highlighting consulting positions when you didn't have a title?
Okay, so there you would say consultant, or you would, if you can say advisor, you could say advisor. And in those roles, and what I like to tell my consultants, I work with them all the time, executives come in and out of consulting roles. So treat the consulting role in your resume just as if it was a regular position, because the achievements that you led are the achievements that you led regardless of whether it was in a direct role or in a consulting role. They're still the same. So still say that you consulted for this organization, name your clients or what type of top industry clients you helped. Talk about working on certain initiatives and either what results it generated, or if in a lot of consulting places you worked shorter stints, so you probably left before you found out what results were to be had, right? So you could say that, but you always know the project to say that you worked in this $2 million initiative and to deliver XYZ, or if it was projected to deliver a certain amount, you can include projected to deliver that.
Okay. And then how do you deal with so many different versions of your resume, but only one LinkedIn profile?
So, and we talked about that before. It's, again, making sure, do I really want to go back and cover everything I did as a librarian right now? I don't. So I either have omitted some of it, or I've gone in and I've included where those roles have pre-created some of the, have given me the insights to do what I do today. So you still want to be you're still that same person, but what have those previous roles brought into your next role? So to say that you want to include them, but include the initiatives that you did in those roles that would be similar to some of the things that you'd be doing today.
Okay, and what about the layout of the resume? There are new format templates with sidebars and more newspaper style layout rather than typical linear. What do you think about that?
So key things for people to hire, when you're looking for, I worked with somebody, the VP of transformation for T-Mobile, and he called me after we worked together and he said, he's like, I'm working with a recruiter and the recruiter is telling me that it doesn't fit into their ATS system. It doesn't matter how high level of an executive you are, they'll probably still put you through the ATS system. So if you have those types of resumes, while they may look really pretty, you should still submit a regular linear one, because any tables you have with lines will truncate. And what happens is, so if you have a thick line, or side lines, with like writing here, writing there, writing there, two things what happens with those layouts. One, they're not easy to read because our eye is trained in the West to go left to right and top down. And so when you have a lot on the page, you don't know which way you want to focus. So from a stylistic aspect, it's pretty, but it's not as functional to read. And then from the technical side of it, when you submit those, they won't go through an ATS system. And so then therefore it'll eliminate you as a candidate.
Okay, how do you deal with a recruiter who asks for your years of degrees during the interview?
You're going to have to give it if you want that opportunity. But again, that would raise a red flag for me. I don't know why that would be. It's not, and I guess what happens is, what you did in maybe engineering school 30 years ago is totally different than what you do in engineering school now. So maybe the reason why they're looking for that is to really bring in some key innovation. But
okay, and then how do you address two recent short-term job durations that just required too much travel and acquisition and consolidation into another state? How do you avoid being seen as a short timer?
Yeah, you can say in there, in the job description what you did, and you can say at the end, like you can still give the brief explanation of what you did in the role, and then address it with the months and years at the end. But you don't need to give any explanation unless that would be a good place for you to use a cover letter and explain that there.
Okay, and then can you share ideas on how to leverage LinkedIn connections at companies to help move your your resume to the hiring managers instead of applying through the website or LinkedIn?
What I would typically do is I would go through and I would find who the hiring manager is for that position, who the recruiter is, and I would tap them directly. I would send them an in-mail message to them. Typically, they do respond right back. I've had that. I actually did that for my husband a couple of years ago. And I was surprised to see, I'm like, well, let me give it a shot. And I became his agent, and I was sending inner emails to those companies. And then they said, go ahead and send me the resume. And so then I uploaded the resume that was saved.
Okay. So now we're getting questions about how they work with you, Adriana. What is the best way? And, you know, how do they arrange for a one-on-one? How do you, what's your fee structure? What's your, you know, business model for that?
Right. So what I typically do, you can go look at my website and see how I work. I've got a very definitive process that works. And it does start with giving, you know, we do a consultation, right? So I offer a 20 to 30 minute complimentary consultation to see where you are. I ask to see whatever form of CV that you have, just so that I can get some insight about who you are and what you bring. And we have a consultation to really go over your goals and where you want to go next from where you've been. And if we've got good chemistry, then we work together. I send you to look at job descriptions. We're back to that. And where we plan that strategy out, right? And so then as we are doing that, then you send me what those are. I start looking and making sure that I create alignments. If we need to redefine that a couple of times, that happens. And then I look to take your resume, and I ask a lot of questions on the resume, and we work back and forth through paper to make sure that I'm asking the right questions and that you're taking the time to answer those questions. When I see things, for instance, that people will say that you led significant revenue or significant cost savings, I want to know by how much. Those are going to be things that I look at a resume from the perspective of a hiring manager or a recruiter. And you don't want to leave that ambiguously open. You say you generated significant revenue. It could be $5 million. It could be 50 million. There's a difference. I'm going to suss those things out. So I usually work with my clients for about 6 weeks or so. And it's kind of like a coaching and resume all in one, to make sure that the product at the end really goes into the direction that you're going for. And in terms of my fee structure, it's hard for me to gauge based on what people are looking for. Because it could be coaching for a longer period of time, or it could be that you've been that COO forever and it's very straightforward. The information is there. We're just going to do a couple of quick iterations. So it depends on how long I'm going to be working with you that I charge.
Okay. And then another question that's come up: how do you explain gaps in your resume?
So everybody has gaps in their resume. So it depends on how long the gap was. Particularly, so if you're looking at months, right? One of the things that you could say, if you took a job and it was, let's say you ended it in 2018, and then the next job is, 2019, and there's a few months of a gap, that's totally fine. I was a stay-at-home mom for 3 years, and so I have those gaps. I include those. Not in the resume necessarily, but I do put those in my cover letters during the times when I worked at corporate.
Okay, and then another question: how do you get the job descriptions from a company?
So it would be, so if for instance, if somebody is telling you somebody is hiring, and try to find that back from the person that sent you that opportunity. You can always go look at the company and see. Usually job descriptions are posted in the company under the careers section. So go into that company and look for them there. If they're externally posted, they should be in the company website. If it's not, and you're looking at the company website and it doesn't look like a great company website and all of that, then you might want to question the company and the opportunity. Right?
Okay, I think that's about it. I mean, I tried to combine a lot of the questions that people had, and This was great. Are you going to be sharing your PowerPoint presentation?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll send everyone a link for the
Oh, hi, Liz. Sorry, Liz was saying something, and I was so excited to see her.
Yeah, so we'll share the PowerPoint as well as the link for the recording, and then thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And you're a rock star. This is absolutely awesome.
But let me know, at some point, if the teams, if I know that you guys all know each other, if I'd be more than happy to do a small group, kind of like a workshop or something, if a small group wanted to get together and do that.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And thank you everyone for joining us. Make it a great weekend and stay tuned for more upcoming topics. Thank you, Adriana.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.